I'd like to acknowledge these traditional owners and acknowledge all of the elders and people in this room, acknowledge the people of the Muslim community who've so beautifully welcomed us here today. It is my great pleasure to be here and acknowledge my people, the Aboriginal people, traditional owners of this part of country, and the Torres Strait Islander people, the other group of Indigenous people, part of this country.
I'd like to now introduce Muhammad Abdullah, the acting Imam of the Karabi Mosque, and David Bush, who is a pastor for multicultural congregations in the Uniting Church, and they will introduce the reasons for why we're here today together. Thank you.
As Australian Muslims, we are standing today side by side with our Christian brothers and sisters and elders from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities to condemn all violence and to plead for peace and respect in our communities around Australia. Over the last few weeks, we have seen an escalation of violence in Iraq and Syria by a rogue group known as ISIS or ISIL. This group assumes the title of Islam and claims to having initiated an Islamic State. However, their violent and extreme actions have been condemned by national and international Muslim scholars and religious institutions and organizations. The horrors conducted overseas in the name of religion are crimes against humanity and sins against God. The Australian National Imams Council, the peak religious body of Australian Muslims, rejects ISIS and denounces their lies as a betrayal of Islam. The Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia, Sheikh Abdul Aziz al-Sheikh, stated on the 26th of May 2014, I quote, "Those who persist to direct the youth to travel to Syria for so-called jihad are not qualified for this role, and it is upon them to refrain from encouraging our youth to travel to these places." Grand Mufti Shawqi Al-Allam from Al-Azhar University, the oldest seat of Islamic learning, condemned ISIS and all of its atrocities in Iraq. The Mufti unequivocally denounced ISIS, stating that the group violates the tenets of Islam. The International Union of Muslim Scholars said that the Caliphate declaration by ISIS is null and void and lacks any realistic or legitimate standards. And the recent so-called fatwa issued by ISIS, making reference to Australia as a target, has no religious authority and must be condemned and rejected. However, such authoritative condemnations are not presented by politicians or media. Instead, with some exceptions, depictions of ISIS as Islamic or representative of Islam continues unabated, fueling the violence, anger, and discrimination against the Australian Muslim community. 13 years ago, the Karabi Mosque, this same mosque in which you gather, was burned to the grounds. In fact, the first mosque in the world after the terrorist attacks of 9/11, this was the first mosque to be burned to the grounds, unfortunately. And so we must make sure that such extremist behavior is not repeated. Yet we now again face similar anger and hate and are being blamed for the actions of those from whom we have unequivocally disassociated ourselves. This is unfair, it is unjust, and it is un-Australian. Muslims have lived in this country since the 1650s and have in many ways contributed positively to the making of this nation. In order to protect the social fabric of our multicultural society, we must all work together to prevent any type of extremism, regardless in whose name it is perpetrated. We are also grateful for the solidarity that has been extended today by leaders of Christian churches and elders from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. We are very thankful and very grateful for your solidarity and for standing with us in these times of need and difficulties, and we ask God Almighty to bless you for that. We call upon all Australians to respect the rule of law, abstain from discrimination, act calmly and compassionately towards others, and uphold the Australian tradition of a fair go. We call on everyone to exercise restraint and civility. We must not let emotions take over common sense. Community harmony should be maintained at all costs. Thank you so much for listening.
It has been in response to the actions and menacing that we have seen in the Australian community in recent weeks, to which Dr. Abdallah has alluded, that a group of clergy and church representatives from across the Logan area decided it was important to come together today to make this stand, a stand of solidarity with our Muslim brothers and sisters. The purpose of today's action and statement is to declare that we will not allow the actions of a few to create or justify religious, racial or ethnic tensions in our community. If we have a way of life to protect, we must live by it. Any vitriol, hate or menace being directed against innocent people who themselves have disavowed violence does not reflect the best of our Australian community values. And in a time such as this, we must live by the best of our community values. A way of life which some people believe needs to be defended by acts of violence, humiliation or intimidation against vulnerable and innocent people who themselves have disavowed violence is not a way of life worth defending at all. And so we stand as Christian and church representatives to say we believe that our community belongs together. Our destiny as the Australian community is a destiny together, and we will stand with each other for peace, for well-being, for justice, and for the dignity of all people and the free practice of religion. So this statement has been drafted to make an unequivocal declaration that whatever actions may occur to intimidate or threaten Muslims in Australia, they have no sanction, no support, no justification from the Christian community.